welcome to Startup to Success with Maria. My guest today is AJ Lee, who is currently SVP Growth at a technology startup focused on supply chain and logistics. He has nearly a decade of experience building and leading marketing and growth organizations at companies ranging in size from seed stage to some of the world's largest e-commerce companies. With a background in both B2B and B2C, he has led demand generation, product marketing, sales operations, PR, and brand, and variety of other functions, scaling startups from zero revenue to 100 million. His previous companies have been listed in Forbes' list of the next billion-dollar startups, with one growing to over 10 billion in revenue. Oh my God, AJ, I can't believe this. He has an MBA from Dartmouth and an MPA from Harvard and lives in LA with his partner and their two furry companions. AJ, welcome to the show. I am so thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much, Maria. It is so wonderful to be on the show. Thank you for the opportunity.
So I have so many questions for you. I can't wait to pick your brain on a lot of the things that I'm personally struggling with as I'm trying to grow Roma Leaf as a baby startup and hopefully get it funded and so on. But I wanna start with strategy, marketing. I know in your previous experiences and probably in the current one too, in your current position, you're always overseeing strategy, marketing, execution, all of it, pretty much from inception all the way to execution. I would love to learn some of the tricks and hacks and ways that you keep it all together, because it could get overwhelming. And I feel like I'm at that point right now where I'm overwhelmed and I don't know how to prioritize. What advice would you give to someone like me who's a startup?
Yeah, so that is a fantastic question, Maria. And I wish I had a sort of silver bullet or a panacea that would answer that question very easily, but I don't. I can provide a little bit of information, at least based on my experience, in terms of what I think you should be thinking about, right? What are the factors that you should be thinking about as you're looking at your business from sort of a bird's eye view, right? You're absolutely right when it comes to marketing and strategy. A lot of the work that I've done has been focused on not necessarily marketing in sort of a pure sense, because one of the things that we've noticed as a discipline within marketing, right, over the past sort of decade or so, is this gradual shift away from marketing as sort of a service center. This is, you see this most sort of prominently in larger companies, but even with startups that have, and personally, I think actually startups may have driven a lot of this change, is that you're hearing more and more so around growth hacking, right? You're hearing about growth marketing. And a lot of that shift is happening because there's this acknowledgement that marketing can't live in a silo, right? It's no longer about we receive a request to build a flyer, right? Or to make a TV commercial, and then we execute on that, deliver it, and then move on to the next item. It's not that simple. You're absolutely right. Marketing is much more strategic now than ever before. And in part, it's because it has such close ties to sales and to product and to operations if you're in an operations heavy business. And so the way that I think about strategic marketing is really partnering closely with anyone else that you are working with in your startup or in your company, right? So this may be your partner, this may be vendors, this may be even your suppliers, right? And when you're thinking about who is in this sort of overall ecosystem of your business, right, that is supporting you or keeping your business trucking along. And as you think about that, some of the questions that I've sort of gone back to is when you're thinking about strategic marketing, basically it comes down to the funnel, right? But in order to really understand your funnel, you have to understand your audience, right? Or your potential target customer base. And so one of the first questions I'll typically ask when I'm advising startups is, do you know who your target prospects are? Do you know who your customers are? In the technology space, we'll call this product market fit. So, you build something, you don't quite know if there's going to be appetite for it. You think there might be, but then you launch it and see whether or not there is. And we call it product market fit. So when a company is selling something that has high product market fit, there's generally demand for it. And in many cases, it's demand that never existed before. You're basically creating demand. In the case of many startups, startups, and Roma Leaf included, I imagine it's, do you know who you are selling to? I absolutely love this focus on the anxiety angle, right? Because so many of us, especially like, it's so timely. If you think about where we are right now with, with COVID and the pandemic, and even, amongst my colleagues, myself included, right, when we're thinking about how COVID has impacted our lives on a daily basis, it's so timely. So even if you're thinking about the folks around you, right, how can that inform who your target audience or your target prospects could be? So in my case, for example, could be young professionals who are potentially burning out because they're working from home, and you're hearing a lot of this, right? On the other hand, is it folks who might be in a different age group who are experiencing pain? I mean, there's 100 different ways that you could take a company like Roma Leaf, but one of the things that I often also see is that startups tend to try to boil the ocean, is what I like to call it, right? They try to cater to everyone and offer and reach out to everybody. And you really can't do that when you have limited resources, because it will very quickly deplete your entire marketing budget, because there's no focus, right? Because there's no strategy behind who you are targeting, and then applying all of the resources and all of your energy to focusing on that one specific segment. And so I think one of the most impactful things that you can do is to build out those personas, get a really deep understanding of what motivates them, like what are their pain points, right? And how do you actually build out marketing or a strategy around marketing that speaks to those pain points, right? Because at the end of the day, what you are selling, right, not just Roma Leaf, but many other folks who are building startups, there's something about your business or your startup that you feel like is unique. You are not, otherwise your competitors are already there and they're doing what you're doing. You are not necessarily doing that, right? And so whatever your competitive differentiator is, there is a target audience for that. And you have to really focus on building a narrative and a story that fits the personas that you're targeting, right? So, step number one for me, even before you start thinking about the funnel, is, do you understand who your target prospects are? And do you understand their personas? And do you understand what motivates them? Like, what gets them up in the morning? I mean, really understanding your target base at a very deep level, I think, is something that is incredibly important. And that sort of informs a lot of your marketing strategy or your growth strategy, right? It's, how do you position the product? What words do you use? What channels can you find these prospects on? And so the very first step, I would say, from a strategic marketing perspective, is really understanding sort of the ideal customer profile, the ICP. And once you've really built that out and it's a detailed persona, you understand where they are, where they shop, what motivates them, what stage of life they may be in, the particular nuances that separate this particular segment from any other potential segment that you could be selling to, or reaching out to, or having as a part of your user base. That will help define what channels you use, and a lot of the other sort of strategy that sort of waterfalls or cascades down from that.
Thank you. I did struggle a little bit about when it came to the target audience, honestly, myself, because I really didn't know. I didn't know initially, and I still don't think I have a clear understanding of who my target audience is exactly. It sort of it's leaning more towards women between the ages of 35 to 54, but we do have male customers too, and it's been hard for me to solidify. I know that the primary is women, but then the secondary, is it men, what percentage? So we're still trying to collect data to really understand who the target audience is. One question I have for you is, until I collect that data, what's your suggestion in terms of identifying who the potential target audience could be? Because initially, most startups don't know, right? They really don't know. And a lot of them want to just go out there and attract everyone. And it doesn't work like that. Like you said, you're going to run out of your resources, your budget, and it's not going to be focused. So what's your suggestion? How do we divide it into segments and test out different campaigns and see which segment reacts to us, and then solidify the ideal customer? Or do we just wait for a year to collect data, or 6 months, and then decide? Like, I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yes, that is my answer. So I think It's actually a combination of both, but perhaps with a little bit lighter lifting, right? So in the case of something that is like a tangible product, right? A really easy way to understand who might be interested in your product might be to simply sell at a farmer's market. Right. So if you sell it at a farmer's market or you go to a flea market, a local flea market or farmer's market, just to understand, and it's less so about making money from the farmer's market. It's more so about having access to a really broad population of people who are coming to visit. So for example, in Los Angeles, you know, you have the Melrose Market, and there's a bunch of different avenues and that you could explore. This with Santa Monica's farmer's market. I mean, there's a bunch. Even potentially erecting a really quick and dirty shop on Etsy, right? Just to see who is coming by your shop, right? But one of the most impactful ways that I've seen some of my colleagues who have small businesses with tangible products is to just do a really light lift sort of selling at a farmer's market, because it gives them an opportunity to actually talk to prospective customers and to sell them on the value proposition, and also get some information back from them. I think the most important thing that you should be thinking about when there is no clear, when really you could have anyone as your target audience, but when you're trying to get more information as to who to focus on first, it's to really find these avenues where you have a mix or a collision of different types of segments, different types of people who are coming together, and you're able to use that space to have an open, honest conversation and really open up that dialogue with them. And that'll start to get your mind moving, your brain juices flowing in terms of, well, maybe this audience makes sense because there's a lot of interest from this. This was the most engaged audience. In the case of Romilly, for example, I would say you have an idea that it's woman, right? I would say, but even with that being the primary, right? Do these women have pets, for example? I mean, there are ways to extend beyond that or go deeper into that, because, you know, I have 2 dogs, as you introduced me with. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And one of the things that I've been, that I absolutely love about CBD is that I'm able to share that with my pets, because it absolutely calms them. And they're both completely neurotic, but that's like one thing that I did not know anything about, right? CBD for pets. And that's something that I imagine, even as you're thinking about your primary audience, it may not necessarily have to be a completely different group. You may be able to leverage your existing base, right? And just go deeper within that base. But identifying who those segments are is something that's very tricky. It's something that we struggle with, and that I've struggled with at regardless of the stage or size of the company, it's something that everyone struggles with, right? And so having lightweight ways, or identifying those lightweight ways to identify who those prospects could be is my recommendation. But I would say try to do it with the least amount of spend. Firing across all channels and using digital marketing, for example, to see which prospects bite is not the best use of your dollars, right? So it would be very easy for you to start an AdWords account and then build out, 15 different ad groups targeting 15 different segments. That, in my opinion and my advice, is not the best way to use your money, right? So I would hack my way to figure out who to target and how to target them, right? Because in the least expensive way possible, right? Because otherwise you will end up spending a lot of money. And you can do channel testing, right?
Right.
And use conversion as the metric to give you, and you can infer from conversion what some of these target prospects are, but it's only as good as the advertising. In the case of Google Ads, it's only as good as your bid, right? How much you're willing to spend. And so I would not spend money on things like that. Instead, I would focus on more intimate settings. I think Romilly's focus on health workshops is absolutely brilliant, right? Because it's a relatively light lift. It's not super, in terms of an investment, it's not massive. And you learn a lot, right? And so those are great ways to identify some segments. And then I would say, reach out to the people that are closest to you, right? Most of us, I would say, have, we have our chosen family, we have our blood family, and between those two, I would say, we probably have a lot of people around us who we could use who are at our disposal. And I think the one blocker to this that I've seen among founders is that there's this fear of failure, which is why they don't want to necessarily share, that.
I went through that. I sort of went through that in the beginning where it was not so much fear of failure, more of like, I don't want them to judge me because I'm in the CD business. And a lot of them tend to think it's marijuana, and I have to explain to them this isn't marijuana. It has no THC in there. It's a whole different. So I've been struggling with that. I think I'm over it now, but it was a long journey.
Yeah, but I would say that use your friends, your family, your chosen family, even your LinkedIn network. Most of us, I would be confident saying that I know maybe 20% of the people who are in my LinkedIn network, right? But at the same time, if you were to actually search your network, there's probably a very large group of people who'd be willing to help you out because it also helps them, right? And so definitely rely on your network. And I would also say you have to be bold and you have to be shameless when it comes to reaching out to your friends and your family. Being the founder of a company is not easy, and it won't get easier, right? And so you might as well jump off the deep end right now and just go for it, because it's not going to get any easier, right? Like being the founder is scary. Starting a new company can be really scary. And the startups that I've seen, that I've had the privilege of being a part of, that I've seen succeed, have been led by folks who have been generally fearless, right? And they are not afraid to put themselves out there. They're not afraid to ask for help. Might as well start that from day one, right? And so when you're thinking about your segments, I would just start with the people around you.
So can you give me an example of, and I haven't done that yet, I'll be honest with you. I've reached out to the closest circle of my friends and colleagues, but I've got 3 layers of colleagues and friends, and, LinkedIn, I have a lot of connections and I haven't utilized it. I haven't announced it. I haven't mentioned anything. Can you give me an example of how I can benefit from that? Not just ask them for help, but maybe send them a product in return for a review. I don't know. What would you suggest in my situation I should do?
Yeah, so you have a pretty good idea of your primary audience, right? So one thing is that you want to validate that, right? And you also want to validate it more broadly, because women between the ages of this and this, it's a fairly large audience, right? Or perspective base. So you probably want to tighten that up, because when you go to market with messaging, you want to figure out what messaging will stick, right? And so as you're looking at your network, as you're going through, what are, in general, like what sort of companies are represented, right? Like are there nonprofits that are represented? What are the groups that are available on LinkedIn? As you go through your network, what groups are they a part of? And that is a really easy, amazing opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity, based on my experience, to basically target a group of people that are interested in something, right? And so whether it may be a CBD group that's on LinkedIn, whether it may be some of your colleagues who are now in the healthcare industry, or now a part of a startup that is focused on wellness, or maybe a meditation app. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can think about how do you go after, or how do you identify a potential network, right? Within a network that you may not necessarily be leveraging right now. So I would say get really creative, like spend a day just going through your LinkedIn network, just to understand what companies are they working for, what groups are they a part of, what have they been posting about, right? A lot of, like, recently what I've seen, and this may be a little bit more specific to Roma Leaf, but recently what I've seen is a lot of posts from founders and senior leaders, especially team leaders, talking about how COVID has put so much stress on teams. This like burnout is what you hear a lot of, right? And there's so much talk around that. How could you leverage that? Not only in terms of reaching out to learn more and saying, hey, my name is Maria. I started this, I started an experience, right? Because to me, Roma Leaf is less so about a product and more so about an experience, right? And so how you position that and how you actually go to market with that. In part, that is what you're doing by reaching out to these folks in the network. But at the same time, you're also looking to them to get some more information. So it's a 15-minute call. I'd just love to introduce myself. We've been connected for the past 5 years, but I haven't really gotten a chance to introduce myself, and I'd love to do so. And have a specific ask. I think that's always nice. One of the things that is absolutely it's a pet peeve of mine is when someone requests to join my network and I don't know who they are. I've never heard of them, right? I think everyone in the startup world gets this all the time, right? And it will range from like from folks who have really done their research and put in the time to do it to folks who are just like have done no research whatsoever, and it's a completely irrelevant product or service, right? And so I would do a little bit of research before you reach out to folks in your network. The great thing is that they're already a part of your network. There's a reason why they added you or you added them, right? And so go back to trying to figure out why you did, and then leverage that relationship, resurrect it. And then as you resurrect that relationship, they use it as an opportunity to just go deep, right? With these different folks. And then they may also lead you on, and you should always, as a part of reaching out to folks in your network and who are you meeting for the first time, is there anyone who you think or that you could introduce me to, right? So use that as an opportunity or a platform to really exponentially grow your network, right? Because that is something that could be really valuable. Don't just have that conversation end with the person that you're talking to. Leverage them and ask them with every conversation, your penultimate question, your second to last question should be, is there anyone else who you think I should be talking to? Would you be willing to introduce me to anybody else in your network? Like that is an incredibly powerful, very lightweight, because if they've already spent 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes with you, they will be willing to make that introduction. Right?
I like that. Thank you so much. That's so helpful. In terms of prioritizing campaigns, that's another area that I'm just so overwhelmed with. And I think, we tested, and to your point, farmers market, I honestly never thought about it because, we positioned ourselves as a higher end luxury market. So for me, farmers market was always out of my mind. But I think it is a less expensive way to get out there and really understand and see where we can get some traction from. So thank you for that. I'm definitely going to use it. But I'll tell you, when we opened up our first flagship store a few months ago, I did start analyzing. I myself would go to the store and spend on average 4 hours a week and try to talk to the people that would walk in and understand what their pain points were. And the anxiety workshop came from that. So I do agree. I think it's important for us to ask the questions. Just go to the potential target audience and ask, and then solidify who you want to narrow it down to. Now, I've definitely narrowed it down, at least for the time being, that it is going to be women, and most of them are dealing with anxiety, especially the ones who are moms, working moms, because COVID has impacted them in probably more ways than most people, because they have to juggle kids, Zoom, and then their own Zoom calls and all of it. So it's been really difficult for them. So I decided to narrow it down for the time being to women 35 to 54 and just start testing some marketing campaigns, focusing on that. And going back to prioritizing marketing campaigns, that's been another struggle of mine, because I want to do it all and I want to push all 10 trains at the same time. And then
you sound like a founder, Maria.
So we need advice on that.
Yeah.
Before we burn out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a tried and true framework that I like to use, and this is, in my mind, this is applicable not just to larger technology companies, although I've deployed this time and time again in my previous roles, but something that I think is applicable regardless of the size of the company, is that you have a limited amount of resources. And, in often cases with startups, it's a limited amount of money, right? And so you have a budget. What you really need to do is understand what the channels are, right? Basically, I call this a channel inventory, right? An inventory of all the tactics that you could use, right, to reach out to them. This ranges from the very inexpensive, like going to a farmer's market, to the very expensive producing a TV commercial, for example, right? It sort of runs the gamut. I would inventory all of that, right? And understand what I like to basically do is map it to the stage of the funnel that I'm really focused on. So for a new company, right, you're really focused on sort of this top of the funnel awareness consideration piece, right? Obviously the conversion, there is a conversion element there because without conversion, you're not making money. But in order for them to get to the point of conversion, they need to know you exist, right? And so there is very high level, just in terms of we call them marketing qualified leads, but in general, it's more so top of the funnel, right? Leads that are coming in. You need to build that awareness. How do you build that awareness? Well, look at all of the tactics that you have at your disposal, right? Digital advertising, so that would be SEM, maybe SEO, for organic content, content marketing. You have print media, podcast, audio, TV. There's hundreds. I think at last count, my inventory stood at something like 130 different tactics we could use, right? And so with that, I would basically then say, okay, this tactic impacts what stage? For this particular segment, women ages 35 to, I think you said 48, 35 to 44?
Yes, 35 to 54.
35 to 54, sorry. 35 to 54, I'd say, okay, so what do I expect this particular tactic? Let's take podcasts, for example. How would I expect that to impact either awareness, consideration, conversion, or retention, right? Because you care about all four. This is just breaking down the funnel into very, very high level buckets. But how would I expect that tactic to impact each of these different stages of the funnel? In Romilly's case, I'm really focused on top of the funnel, right? And so I want to identify the tactics that would really benefit the top of the funnel, really get my name out there, get my brand out there. But I always cross that against resource cost, right? And so what I like to see is, what is the expected impact? I usually put that in text, right? And then on top of the text in the cell, like in Excel, for example, I'll use a color. And the color refers to, is it inexpensive or is it very expensive? So if it's inexpensive, then it's green. If it's very expensive, then it's red. So it gives you a really quick and dirty view, like a way of looking at all of the tactics that you have that impact different stages of the funnel. And then it allows you to very easily understand, okay, I want to focus on high impact, so the text is high, and green color, cost is low. High impact, low cost impacts top two stages of the funnel, right? And then I just zero in on those. And then typically now what we're really seeing is that marketing organizations or growth organizations are really zeroing in on just three, like top three drivers, right? So rather than trying to use all of the tactics, they're focusing on just the three that really work, right? And then really doubling down on those. And so that's the way that I would think about this, right? Is that you have all of these things you could do. What are the ones that, how do all of these different tactics impact different stages of the funnel for your target segment? And then how expensive is that tactic? And what is the expected impact that that tactic will have? Once you understand those two, you have a map. You basically have a roadmap, right? And you just follow that roadmap. As you start to grow, then you want to start putting a little bit more money into the middle of the funnel, right? Conversion. Like, what are the different tactics that would increase conversion? Probably coupons, promotions, right? Like, there are different tactics at different stages of the funnel that work, right? Some that are more expensive, some that are less. Like a coupon or a discount will hit your margin, right? It'll hit your top line, but it'll probably mostly impact your margin, right? Because taking a cut from your top line is going to have a disproportionate impact on your margin, right? So are you willing to take that hit to your margin? Maybe, if you're able to retain the customer and then that once they're in, you've hooked them, and they come back regularly, right? So what is your lifetime value of that customer? If it's fairly high, Maria, then you should be willing to spend or maybe even give that product away technically for free, financially for free, right? Where the coupon is you're not making any money, right? You're basically eating up all your margin in order to acquire that customer, knowing that the customer will come back. So again, across all the stages of the funnel, just understand what the tactics are and then map impact and then cost, right? That way you're managing, what the expected impact is, but you're also spending within reason, right? So that you're not just trying to burn all of your cash across a whole bunch of different tactics without knowing what will work, because no one has it covered.
That's so helpful, because I think the issue I was having, I was actually going down in the funnel and thinking about conversion as I was thinking about all the different campaigns that we have in line to execute. And ultimately, the KPI was drive sales, but I forget that we're still a baby. Nobody really knows about us. I mean, to a certain extent, they don't compared to some of our largest competitors. So that's going to definitely change things around, because then if I look at it from the top of the funnel and think about just branding, awareness, and all of that, I can lean on so many easier and less expensive campaigns versus the ones that I was really planning to execute and focus on.
Yeah, and I think, Roma Leaf has already gotten some amazing press, right? You've gotten great press, you've been on the news, and I think that that's all a part of this sort of top of the funnel activity, right? That you're trying to build brand awareness around. But don't lose sight of brand building, because that's something that will continue to pay dividends, right? Because when you have a strong brand, that also impacts the bottom of the funnel, right? It impacts retention as well. And so once they're, for example, hooked on content, right? You have really hard-hitting content, they will come back for more, right? And the more stickiness you build around content, for example, the more trust and credibility you build with your brand, and they're more willing to pay more, buy more. As you launch new products, they're going to be your brand ambassadors and your champions. And so that's the way that I would think about that.
I love it. Thank you. And I think before we jump into B2B marketing a little bit, because I don't know anyone that knows so much about B2B marketing as much as you do. So I want to just tap into that brain of yours a little bit. But in terms of the workshops, so we've done the anxiety workshops 3 months in a row. And this last one was a hybrid one where we were online as well as offline, in real, in person. And starting next month, we're planning to do it online for a few months, just so we can have unlimited amount of people coming in and joining us. With the in-person one, we were limited to maximum 40 to 50 people because of COVID. We have to, all the LA stuff that we have to deal with. With that said, the last 3 were somewhat similar in terms of the idea. And obviously the title of the workshop is Hello Relief, Goodbye Anxiety. And I think anxiety is a huge topic, and most of our customers come to us because they need some kind of a relief for anxiety. But I'm struggling with how to expand that even further so that we're not delivering the same content. The doctors aren't talking about the same old thing every single presentation, every single time, especially when we've got people. Last 2 workshops, we had 4 people that showed up again twice. And so I feel obligated to give them something new and fresh. And so what's one way to be creative with ideas and maybe even bringing on speakers who are a little bit more different or talk about different things? Any suggestions on that?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, mixing up the speakers, you will automatically get different content, right? And so for those 4 or 5 people, let's get that up to 100, right? I love the idea of moving this to digital, because it opens up the aperture of the potential audience so much more, right, than in person. Obviously, physical is wonderful, right? But I think we've all become very accustomed to attending meetings virtually, right? And so one thing that I would say, and this is not directly addressing your question, but one thing that I would consider, and you may have already done this, Maria, is sending something out in advance, right? So for everyone that has signed up, send something out. It doesn't have to be product, but it could be like a pamphlet, or it could be a booklet, or it could be something that complements the workshop, right? And that might be a really nice way, A, to remind them that they've signed up for this workshop, B, encourage them, because this is serious, right? You are a legitimate business, and as a part of that, you are providing them with a free event, right, for them to join. And once you've done that, there is this sort of quid pro quo dynamic that happens, where because you've given them something that is value added to them, they feel also obligated to join your event, right? And when they join your event, they will walk away having received some sort of valuable, advice, counsel, something, right? And so it's good for them, it's good for you. But I would definitely consider sending something out, because we're seeing more and more of that now. And I think in B2B with companies that are, for companies that are fully remote, they'll say, oh, we're going to have a virtual happy hour and we're going to send you either a bottle of wine or a cocktail making kit, right? And so everyone basically comes together and does it virtually. There is definitely an opportunity to do that. But with that being said, I think the way to really mix up content is to think about potentially, I like to say sometimes non-promotion is the best promotion, right? So it may not necessarily be about promoting CBD, right? And so, at these workshops, it may be simply about learning how to manage anxiety. And so having someone come in who is just talking high level about how to manage through anxiety, how to manage through different situations. And maybe one, CBD may be one part of that, right? But it might be teaching folks how to breathe, right? Like that's one of the most impactful things from yoga that, if you're a practitioner of yoga that you walk away with is, wow, I've been on this earth for 40 years and I don't know how to breathe, right? That's what you walk away with. You're like, oh my goodness, it's completely changed my life. Yeah. So I think something like that would be really value added because people don't typically have an opportunity to just stop what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. This is a moment of calm for folks who are joining the workshop. And so if you're able to sort of leverage that moment of calm and build off of that and have someone come in, perhaps a yoga instructor, to teach people how to breathe, that could be something that's really impactful. Because again, Roam Relief is about an experience. Ultimately, of course, you're building a business, but even the way that I think about, managing growth for very large B2B companies is sometimes non-promotion is the best promotion, right? What is the white paper? A white paper is not necessarily, it's actually by design, not promotional. A white paper is about something having to do with the industry that is just information and educational about the industry. It is by design not meant to be promotional for the company that is issuing or publishing the white paper. In many ways, this sort of event can borrow or leverage some of that, right? It's non-promotion as the best way of promoting yourself, right? Because again, your brand is about goodbye anxiety, right? But you're not, certainly by no means suggesting that the only way to get rid of anxiety is through CBD. Of course not. So invite other folks into your workshop to teach people how to breathe, maybe to how to meditate, right? You could have someone, you could even co-market. There are a number of really big meditation apps now. And I'm sure, I use a couple of them. And a lot of companies now are actually starting to subsidize them, but that's a great opportunity to have someone from one of those sorts of companies come and just share a little. It's like a co-marketing opportunity for them, so they would love that. But at the same time, it's a great opportunity for you to sort of borrow from the halo effect of these very well-known brands, right? So having someone from this big meditation app come to your workshop means that you're probably going to increase or draw a much larger crowd than you otherwise would, while they benefit from it.
I love that idea. And what's a sneaky way of making sure that I get that halo effect from it? Do we make sure that they promote it on their social media accounts as well, so that we're tapping into their audiences?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So any sort of agreement, even if it's a yoga instructor who comes, right? Their yoga studios, they typically have huge rosters, right, of folks. And so, and many of them have gone virtual and vastly increased their user base or their yoga student base because they went virtual, right? And so even if you're doing something like that, the potential reach is enormous. And so, I also like to call myself a lazy marketer sometimes, because I think there are ways to I like to call them hubs and spokes, right? So we typically go after each spoke, and rather than going after each spoke, if you can identify the hubs and have the hubs go out to the spokes for you, that is the best way to market, because it's cheaper, B, it's more impactful, C, you're leveraging their halo, their brand, they've already built up that trust, right? And so the hub and spoke model is something that you often hear with supply chain, et cetera. But when it comes to marketing, I use that often, right? Because I am a lazy marketer. Like I don't want to have to go through all the spokes, right? Or to go after all the spokes. So being able to identify the hubs and have them work with you, right? And work on your behalf can be incredibly impactful.
That's genius advice. Thank you. I'm gonna jump on that and focus on the hubs, because to your point, we need to do less. Less is more sometimes. We have, I can't believe this, but we literally have almost less than 3 minutes left. So I don't even want to talk about B2B marketing at this point. Like, I feel like I have more questions about Bromaleaf. And speaking of Bromaleaf, influencer marketing has been very impactful for us from day one. And we actually generate sales from our influencers because we generally tell them to use promo codes and promote it and so on. So it's a bit of a direct response marketing mixed with branding and all of that. Now, as you know, we had, with our workshops, we had sponsors and a bunch of different brands, health and wellness brands that came on board and sponsored, especially this last event. We had about, I think, almost 15 or 20 sponsors that just send us products for all the guests. And so now we have access to all these sponsors that we can potentially partner with and start working with. And my question for you is, besides, thinking about getting them on the podcast and interviews and so on to build this relationship, what other suggestions would you have for me to think about in terms of how do we really tap into those hubs? Because some of them are more established than we've been. So.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. So I think the big thing is, what do they care about? What do these hubs care about, right? Because at the end of the day, they're always trying to add value for their users, right? And in many ways, Bromaleaf inherently adds value because your product basically reduces anxiety, right? And so I think with that being said, trying to really understand the best relationships and the best these are strategic partnerships. The best strategic partnerships are where there is a strong win-win, where both parties walk away feeling like they got a better deal, right? And so at the end of the day, one of the things to really think about is, for each of these potential strategic partnerships, what value would you be adding to that partnership? Like, who is their customer base or user base, right? In the case of a meditation app, for example, and what do they care about, right? And are there specific parts of their business model where you might fit in more naturally, right? And so I would definitely be thinking about, how do I add value to them, right? Because no one is going to do it for free, right? Like, they want something. There is always a quid pro quo with a strategic partnership. And so understanding what they're looking for and just reviewing, like, what are the things that they've been focusing on, like, watch all their videos on YouTube, read all of the interviews that their CEOs have had, like, try to understand and tap into the actual mindset, right? The psyche of what is going on at that particular company and why they want to work with you, right? Because them sending you goods, right, in terms of sponsoring your event, that's not out of charity, right? There's something in it for them. It's like a branding opportunity. I would double click into that, right? I would double click into the branding opportunity and try to understand, well, what is it about the brand that you feel there's a relationship or potential strong relationship between Bromaleaf and your brand? And then once you have that, maybe there's an opportunity to have more virtual webinars. Maybe there's an opportunity to start publishing content together. I mean, there are all of these different things that you could do with them, but I think you have to really understand what value you are bringing to the table, right? And once you understand that, then I think it's pretty much limitless, right? Like, they want strong partners. They feel like you would do a great job with co-marketing, right? And they feel like they can borrow from your brand halo as well, right? And so being able to also be a good partner is important, right? So because there is that quid pro quo, how are you also promoting them, right? How are you also leveraging your products, your customer base, et cetera, and how are you sharing what they do, right? And so there is definitely a sort of give and take, right, in terms of the strongest strategic partnerships, but I would definitely be thinking about, like, what is the actual value add that you are bringing to them.
I love it. AJ, thank you so much. I feel like we have to invite you back on the show again. This flew by so fast, and I still have so many questions, and user help and so many other things, but we are we're running out of time, and I want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know how busy you are. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you so much, Maria. It was a pleasure. Thank you for the really intelligent questions. I mean, these are it's so nice for me to have a break in my workday to just be thinking about this, right? So I enjoy having these conversations. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the show. And of course, I would love to join again. So continued success, wishes for success with Rumaleaf.
Thank you so much. I think if we can get you on the show a few more times, we'll be very successful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Maria.